Excellent. Well, thanks, Alfred, for joining me this morning. And obviously, the world has been shaken by various things this year. I mean, we thought that this year we'd just be talking about Brexit. And then along came COVID-19. And then along came the death of George Floyd on the 25th of May. And that obviously sparked mass protests worldwide.
Yeah.
And Alfred, I mean, you and your family living here in the UK, living in Norwich, you and your wife are business people running a care home. But obviously you're from Ghana, your wife is from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Tell me, when this all kicked off, what was your immediate response to the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I think, to put it in context, really, people maybe need to understand what the Black Lives Matter really is. Now, the Black Lives Matter is, it is a human rights international organization or movement. And their main objectives really is to campaign against, police brutality, and also racism against Black, and people of color. Now, that is what is sprung them up in order to campaign on these things. They are not a terrorist group, as some people want to put it that way. And when I actually heard about, the incidents in America, I will be honest, I was quite in disbelief and shocked and horrified. The main reason is that why should someone go and arrest someone in that way? Surely there could have been a better way to arrest this person. And, why put your knee on his neck? I mean, if you've done biology, and I think everybody has done a little bit of biology, that is the main artery that gets to the brain. And, he dies. And, all that goes on in my mind is, but why is this happening? Why should this be happening in this time and this period of our life that we're in? Now, the protests that has been going on, most of them has been peaceful. And the reason for the protests really is to bring to light what people feel, people in authorities, politicians are not addressing. So, they go on the protest march to make their case and their voices heard. It's not to loot or do things, but to make their voices heard. And through that, actually, you can see the result that the people who did this have now been charged. Initially, they were just dismissed. So it will have gone pushed under the carpet, and that is it. So that is what the protest has achieved. And it is my hope that this could be a turning point where the issue of racism is really brought to light, and to see some of the difficulties that, the people, Black people and people of color actually have been going through.
Yes. Yeah. That's very good. And I think what is so important is what you said, that Black Lives Matter it's not a terrorist organization. It's not a looting organization. There will always be those in any organization who take things to the extreme.
Yeah.
We see that in Christianity, where we'll have Christian extremists and Muslim extremists and so forth. And so every cause will have its extremists. And I think there was, I've been quite active on social media over the last week because I've been absolutely incensed by this. I come out of a country, South Africa, where racism was institutionalized. It was legal. Yeah. It was actually at government level where it was almost enforced, and seeing the country heal from that. And so to see that nations going back to that kind of thinking is hurtful for myself, but from the white side of the so-called fence. But one of the things that I did put on to Facebook earlier this week was a picture of a white woman in America holding up a sign. And the sign said this: if my son went for some Skittles, I think assume those are sweets, and didn't return, or played in the park and didn't return, or went for a jog and didn't return, or reached for his license in his car and didn't return, and with his last dying breath called out my name, I would probably want to burn down the city too.
Yeah.
So that's contextualizing it. It's not saying that looting is okay.
Yeah.
Because some of those looters were not exactly doing it mournfully. They had big smiles on their faces, carrying out big 50-inch TVs and things like that. And they weren't doing that in memory of George Floyd. So there will always be those that spoil it. But at the same time, you can sort of understand the anger that has been boiling. Because like it or not, even though we live in the UK, which is not a racist country, there will always be those that think racially. And so there has been a belief that white people do have certain privileges that are unspoken. It's I think I put it out in one of my earlier video blogs that it's as if white, and to quote Paul Scanlon, who commented on the subject, it's as if white people have an invisible backpack on their backs that is full of all the equipment for life, and that opportunities just come to them. Now, whether that's true or not, that's obviously a perception that people have. Would you agree with that perception, that it would appear that sometimes society, certainly in predominantly white countries like the United States, the UK, that white people seem to have a door open to them more frequently?
Well, I mean, I would say that there is a bit of truth about that. Well, because obviously you live in a predominantly white environment, and and the stereotypes and perception that have been put out there about Black people at times can be a hindrance to Black people moving forward. And you can see it in people either going for work, interview, etc. And they show up, maybe they spoke very well over the phone because either they were born here, but as soon as they go there, and then people say, oh, we weren't, and it just changed. Actually, we weren't expecting you. Yeah. And you can.
Well, and what they're actually saying is, we weren't expecting a Black person.
That's right. So it is there, and at times, yes, there is that privilege that plays, to the white narrative where people are able to get to places where Blacks cannot go there because of the perception that you're not fit for this, you shouldn't be in that job, you don't actually qualify to be what you do, why are you doing what you're doing? So there is an element of truth there.
And I think, look, we've veered a little bit of our pre-arranged script. I think this is an important thread to pull at, because some Black people will say, when they go into a shop, the security guard seems to follow them around, because there's an automatic assumption that they might be there to steal something or something like that.
I mean, that is actually very true, because obviously my daughter went to uni just last year, and one day she actually phoned us from the shop that the person seemed to be following me around, and I mean this was quite new to her, because we've grown up in a environment where we go to the shop, we buy what we want, and where she just realized wherever I'm going, so we just leave the place, and go somewhere else. To the point that at times I had to drive there and try and take her to the shop, and then help her do her shopping. But it doesn't need to be that way.
It doesn't need to be that way, and it's heartbreaking to even hear something like that, because I know your daughter, and I know that I know how she's been raised, and to think that somebody would even think of following her around in a shop because they think she's got bad intentions is absolutely terrible, because I think both of my sons have probably never had to go through that.
Yeah.
And so that's where we talk about institutionalized white privilege. It's something I also said on social media recently. It's like when you take your child to school at the beginning of the school year and you see that their teacher is Black. Is there that little moment in the white person's thinking, oh my word, is this going to be okay? Does this person know enough to teach my child? Do they know how to teach? Will my child understand them if they speak with an accent? It's that kind of thing. And also walking down a street and a Black person's walking towards you. Is there immediate fear in the white person? Or what's this person going to do? Are they going to stab me? Are they going to mug me? Whereas if a white person's walking towards them, there's no thought of that.
Yeah.
You know, that is what we're talking about, sort of an institutionalized kind of racism, and it's tragic, you know.
It is actually, and it can be quite, disturbing to a Black person. For excuse me. For example, we bought our business. We came to our business. We went to our business, and people who want to come in there seem to begin to question you whether you've got the ability to run what you've spent money to buy. And obviously it becomes a little bit irritating. Say, hang on a minute, I won't waste my money to buy something that I can't run, number one. And if I don't have the qualification, I won't be here. So you always have to try and more or less defend yourself and try and prove to someone that I can do what I said I've been given to do. And it doesn't need to be that way.
Whereas if you and your wife were white, there'd be no question asked.
Absolutely not. There won't be.
And I think also, sorry, just to jump in there, also because of the sector that you're working in, you're working with the elderly, you're working in frail care, you're working in a care home, you're running your own care home. As you say, you bought the care home. But also, and people should know this, you and your wife actually specialize in working with dementia patients.
That's right, yes.
And you have a whole dementia wing at your care home, and your care home is very well thought of and very well spoken of. And people should need to know that you operate with a high degree of excellence there. And as a matter of fact, you're one of the few care homes in the UK that has been completely COVID-free.
Absolutely.
Completely COVID-free. Because of how responsibly you and your wife managed it right from the get-go. And you went into total shutdown, total lockdown, and you've never had any incidents. But have you actually ever had a situation where, and why I say it's important for people to know that you're working with the elderly is because sometimes older people will have an older mindset. And the mindset from years gone by is not as liberated as it is now. Have you ever had situations where you've come up against racial discrimination, abuse from one of your clients?
Well, I mean, we have had situations, where people want to bring their relative into our care home. And then, we have to take them around, and we'll be going around with these people and their loved one together with one of our staff who will be white. Now, who is actually our someone we've employed. And walking around with my wife, they try to actually speak to the white person who is actually accompanying my wife instead of speaking to the owner and the manager of the place. Wow. And, ask questions which the manager should be answering. But, because we've worked with our staffing team and they know how we are, who we are, they tend to then refer the person, I'm sorry, you need to be speaking to the owner. This person is the owner of the place. And at times people ask, have you got anyone above you? Is there anyone else that we can talk to above you? Wow. And
it's almost as if they can't take in the fact that you are at the top.
Yeah, they can't take it that you are at the top. And then, at times, my wife will end up telling them, yes, I've got someone above me. And, he's my husband, if you want to speak to him. And some might even end up saying, I'm sorry, but I haven't dealt with, anyone of a different, race. So you tend to, see some of this thing. But over the years, as we've gone, we've had the place for over 16 years now. Yeah. People have seen what we can do and the transformation that we've brought to the place. So actually people who want to come there really want to bring their, relative to the place. And the staff know who we are, what we are capable of doing. Yeah. And so it's died down a little bit, but every now and then you get that little someone making that comment. Yeah.
And really, when they're saying, is there somebody above you? What they're actually saying, the subtext there is there a white person I can talk to?
Obviously, that's what they are trying to say. Is there a white person I can talk to? And a white person should be owning this and you working for the white person. So is there someone that we can tell us, actually, no, we own this place, and whatever you see here, we've transformed it to this place. It's a sad state of affairs, but as you're saying, that is a mindset, and is a mindset especially of maybe the older generation. But as the world have changed, you expect that there should be a change in perception of this. But there is still elements of racism that is in the society of UK, and I think people need to recognize that.
And I think if you had to take somebody who says that, take them to task, and you said to them, listen, you being racist, they would probably be absolutely horrified and like, no, I'm not at all racist, because people don't actually understand what racism is. And it's if they're not saying, oh, I hate black people. They're saying, I'm just not used to this. But that in itself is a form of racism, where there's almost an assumption that you as a black man must be working for a white man. You can't be at the top.
Yes. That is the assumption, and that is what is the perception, that you simply cannot run this organization the way it is running, and there must be surely someone that you are reporting to or who is telling you what to do. And I said, hang on, there is no one that I'm reporting to. We run this place because we have the ability to do what we do. I mean, my wife and myself have over 40 years of experience, combined experience, working in healthcare. So we know what we have to do. That is why we decided to go in a lockdown before the government said, let's lock down, because we could tell what was going to happen and allowing people in and out. So because of our experience, we decided, we need to lock this place down straight away, and there are a lot of black people like us who have got experience and expertise to run things, to do things. And my hope is that there will be an understanding that, people can do things. And as we go along and we look at it from the Christian perspective, we would understand that we are all created in the image of God, and, in Genesis, I didn't see God's conveyor belt where he says, yes, white people first, next, black. No, it doesn't exist. He creates everyone in his own image and in the image. So we have human beings who can do things, not because of the color of their skin, but because of the fact that they are created by God. Yeah. And people just have to accept it that way, really.
To me, what is really sad and and once again, this is something that I've had to be healed of or cleansed of or delivered of, if you want to put it in spiritual terms, is the thought that just because somebody's skin pigmentation is slightly darker than mine, that they're not the same as me. We're all the same on the inside. I know you well enough. We actually were born hours apart, in fact, in Africa. Yeah. We're exactly the same age. We both love our wives. We both love our children like crazy. And we both have children in university at the moment. And we both have children that are working in the professional environment. And so in essence, the only difference actually is that your skin pigmentation is darker than mine, and I've spent enough time with you to know that we share the same spirit. We share the same outlook. We share the same passion for Christ, for our lives, for our families, and all of that. And so, that is something that people have to wake up to. That it's just skin, actually.
Yeah, that is all it is. Yeah.
And then what I really don't like is when we have this hashtag Black Lives Matter, and then people immediately counter it and say, oh, but all lives matter. Yeah, we know that. Okay. Yeah. But once again, something that I posted on Facebook earlier this week, there's a picture of a little African-American girl holding up a poster. She looks about 8 or 9 years old. And the poster says, we said Black Lives Matter. We never said only Black Lives Matter. We know that all lives matter. We just need your help with Black Lives Matter, because right now, Black lives are in danger.
That is exactly what it is. That is exactly because the Black Lives Matter really is not really saying that all life doesn't matter.
It's not exclusive.
I actually read something on online, and the analogy was that if there is a car crash, and there are people in the car, and the paramedics come in, they are going to attend to the one who is seriously injured first, and possibly airlift them to the hospital, and then attend to the rest of the people, because at that time, that person's life really is critically at stake. So what is happening that right now, because of what has been happening and the racism and the effect of racism, the life of Black people, especially in America and in some of the cities in the UK, is really being undervalued. And hence, there is that need to attend to that so that we can address that issue. That is why the hashtag is saying Black Lives Matter, just to let people know that actually their life matters. Let's give it a little bit of attention and bring it to where God wants it to be. You know,
the analogy of the car crash is just so brilliantly accurate. You know, it's like the paramedics will use a triage system and go for the people that really need the help the most. And
that's
the
right.
reality is that is where it's at the moment. You know, Jesus left the 99 to go and rescue the one that was in danger.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, and or should I say, Jesus told the story of the shepherd that did that. And when the shepherd was doing that, he was not saying the other sheep don't matter. He was saying the other sheep are not in danger.
Yeah.
The other sheep are okay. Let me go and rescue that one. So you've said how you've actually experienced sort of racism here in the UK. What do you, as a Black professional man and also as an ordained minister of the gospel, what do you want white people to know?
I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that there is racism in our society, and the racism exists. And it might be in the form of institutionalized or systemic. We might not see it, but it's a bit subtle. We can see subtle racism. We can see microaggression, and we can see the violent bit of it. But it exists. And what I would really want people to realize is that we need to do something about it, because this is not how God created the world. Racism is a man thing. It is not a God thing. So we need to really be able to do something about it, because the effect of racism, it can be quite disturbing. What I would say is that we tell my white friends is that we need to really empathize. We need to empathize, not sympathize. Because when you sympathize, you pity someone. And then so for look at him and you give handouts to people. But when you empathize, you actually put yourself in that person's shoes and you feel what they are feeling. You go through what they are going through, and that would effect change. But sympathy doesn't effect change, because you give a handout or an aid and off you go. But we need to realize that and then be able to do something about that. Also, we need, there need to be the recognition is that Blacks, people and Black alike have gone through a difficult period in their history. And we can really be part of bringing about this healing process where people can have opportunity to advance in life, because racism actually creates a barrier for people to move forward. You go for a job, you qualified for it, because of your accent, you're not given the job. You are in a job, you need to be promoted, somebody comes and then that person is promoted and you still remain the same. I used to be on the wards, and I saw some people who had worked on the wards for about 20 years and they were never promoted. And they could see other people who have come in, newly qualified, staff, been there for 2 years and then go above them. They were just, broken. And they didn't really care anymore about giving the love and care to the job. They were just there to get their paycheck. So it will be a good thing for us to realize this and then do something to change the situation. You know, and to realize that racism is not okay. You know, it needs to be changed.
I think what's so key in what you're saying there is the word empathy. And that's the ability to see the world through somebody else's eyes.
That's right.
I could never walk a day in your shoes, but I can say, God, you know, by your grace, help me to see what he sees, help me to see what she sees, and help me to try and fathom what I would be experiencing if I was going through what that person's going through right now, how I would be feeling, you know. And so it sort of brings me to my next question, and then for myself, how can I do better as a leader of a church that is predominantly Black? We do what we can to sort of accommodate, or should I say, to make everybody feel comfortable. It's very difficult, like with our music, for instance, we can't just do, say, Nigerian music or Ghanaian music or something like that, because there's the language barrier and there's the cultural differences and everything. So we found sort of middle ground, and we sing English songs and contemporary stuff like that. Yet people still come, and which means that's not a hindrance to them. But how do you think somebody like myself in my position can do better?
I think that, as I've said, you know, and I've worked with you, and you already recognize racism and the effects that it has, you know, on the people and you know, their well-being and their mental state, because it can be damaging for them. I think that it's always going to be good to recognize that, and in our teaching, be able to actually bring teaching in that field to try and heal, you know, both the divide, both white and Black, to realize that God's agenda really is a people that work together. You know, in Ghana there is a motto of a school called Achimota School, and their motto is a keyboard. You know, where what they are trying to say is that you can play the white keys on its own or the Black keys on its own, but it never really sounds right unless you play them together. And when you play them together, you get a good melody. So I would say that yes, we recognize that, you know, there is racism. We talk about it and how we can, you know, help heal and change mindset. There have to be a lot of teaching also to, you know, people of color and Black mind, to actually let them realize that they matter, they are valued by God, and break down the years of devaluation that they have actually accumulated. Because, you know, that's what, if you look at some of the Black churches, they do a lot of teaching that you might think that it's motivational teaching, because they have to work a lot on the mindset of people to try and more or less liberate them from what has kept them bound, to say, you can do what God says you can do. You know, so we might have to have some of those teaching or some seminars like that to let people realize that actually you are created in the image of God. Go and you know, explore. And we can also begin to maybe learn about some of these discrimination and stereotypes that exist about, you know, people group. You know, when I work in Tower Hamlets, which is in London before, and Tower Hamlet has got a lot of Asian and Bangladeshi community out there. And one of the things that the hospital did was to actually take everybody through a diversity course. So through that, we learned about you know, some of the key you know, diversity and the key culture, way of norms of this people group, you know, because I mean, I used to go there and I didn't know, whenever I went there, they offered me a cup of tea, and I was, initially I would refuse, because I mean, I just wanted to go in and out. And actually, I didn't know that I was actually being disrespectful to them, you know, and then so I had to learn and know, when they are offering you the tea, they're actually welcoming you into their house. So we had to learn some, and we can learn some of the key, you know, norms and culture of this diverse group and celebrate them. I know we already do the International Day, in Eternity, which is a brilliant thing, and we can carry on doing that as we go along. But some of the songs, there are quite a few contemporary songs that are quite popular with the people of color. For example, "Break Every Chain." It's actually one of the songs, and the Sinach song that we now sing on "Even Though I Don't See You." God
That's
is
right. Waymaker, miracle worker. Yeah.
Okay, so we can look at some of these songs, which is not from Ghanaian dialect or Nigerian dialect or from the Congo's dialect or the Zulu dialect. But then,
yeah. But also when you look,
my Nigerian friends,
when you look at the context of those songs, they're all about breaking chains of the past. They're all about God making a way where there seems to be no way. He's always working, which to a white person, we would say, well, okay. But for a black person, is it possible then that there's a deeper significance to that? Where in spite of what has happened, God is still God.
Yes, there is always a deeper, conversation to these things, because, it is taking them back to their roots to say, yes, despite the fact that at times we are facing a lot of opposition, a lot of difficulties, God will still make a way for us, and God will still take us forward. So there are some of these songs that we can bring in, and it will lift the people up and then encourage them to actually go forward. Because mind you, some people might come to a church, and they might have gone through a very difficult time at work. So when they come to church, that is a time that they need to be uplifted and encouraged to go back out there and then be able to face life.
And is it possible that the difficult time that they've had at work might be different to the difficult time that the white person had at work, where the white person might have just had, the budget didn't balance or something like that, or, whereas the black person might come because they've actually been discriminated against by a customer, or they've been passed over for a promotion or something like that. And so there's a different sort of heaviness on their spirit when they come to church.
Yes. Or they might have tried to get a loan, and then, the loan was refused for no reason, or, they are facing challenges, which is all caused by the barriers of, racism. So, it's something that we have to take on always to try and bring them out of these things, and letting people realize that God loves you and we love you, and we are in this, and we are going through this together. And so that is one of the things, and I think we're doing that already, in Eternity, but we have to try and be very inclusive, so that we can bring people on board, leadership, etc. Not just for the numbers, but that to hear, the fact that they've got something to actually give to the community and move things forward.
And I think your closing comments there were, they sort of segue very nicely into sort of our final thing here, where I want to say, what can we specifically as Eternity Church do better? And I think what you said there is so very key, and it's something I've always said, and you will know I've always said this in leadership meetings. I don't want to bring people onto leadership just to do window dressing, because I think when we a largely black congregation, yet out of the 5 members of our leadership team, 3 are white, and the 2 black is yourself and your wife. And we are in the process, as you know, of appointing another person who is of color. But the thing is, I've always said I don't want to window dress, because I think you actually do more damage than good when you window dress. In other words, for the sake of appearances, let's just bring a black person on. But you're doing that person no favors, because you're pulling them out of their calling. You're putting them into something that God didn't mean for them to be in, but you're doing it so that you look good. And I think window dressing becomes very, very dangerous. And we certainly saw that in South Africa with the dismantling of apartheid under the Mandela administration. which was a necessary thing to happen. And he was a brilliant leader. I was proud to call him my president. And I lived in South Africa under his rulership. But very often there was a window dressing that happened where CEOs of massive companies, multi-million pound companies, were being replaced with a black person. And that person did not actually have the experience or the necessary qualifications, but they put something in place in that country where there were tax incentives to bringing black people on. So the more black people you had in top positions, the less tax you paid, which to me is wrong, because you're then window dressing. And what happened was those people themselves, I mean, you know when you've got the job when you shouldn't have got it. You know, hang on, I don't deserve this. I'm not qualified for this. It's embarrassing for that person. It's difficult for that person. We saw it in sports teams where it became compulsory to select black people into teams, whether they had been trained up enough to be at that level was secondary. They were put into the team because of their skin color, and it was obvious when the team would play. And the black players themselves were stepping up and saying, I don't want to be a part of this. I want to know that I'm in the team because I'm the best in my position in the country.
That's right, yeah.
I don't ever want to have to say, am I in this because of my skin color? It's almost like a reverse racism, isn't it? Where we start getting into tokenism like that. And as a church, I will say this very clearly, we don't do tokenism. We look for people who I can work with, who I have a certain chemistry with, because as we know in leadership meetings, I'm the one that will steer it, that God has given me that mandate. And so I would, and the color of a person's skin has never, ever, ever been part of our discussion. As a matter of fact, the only time we've ever discussed that is when I have said, let's not appoint people just because of their skin color. If somebody is presenting in a certain way where I feel they carry a mantle of governmental leadership in a church, let's develop that person. You know. And so the final thing really is, how can we then as a church do better in serving black people in our community, black people that are in the church already?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought about this, for a bit. And what I would say is that as a church, and I'm saying Eternity Church and the church at large, we have to have a look at the history of church and history of church things. And there are quite key things that I'll bring to your attention. Now, when the Roman Empire in 5th century collapsed in the western part of the Roman Empire, it is the church that stepped in to actually take up the pieces and, pick up the people, the citizens, and, provide for them and move them forward. Now, it is the church that actually helped bring about mass education for everybody, even in the Western world and etc. And it is a church that after World War II stepped in to actually do things. And even in the UK, during winter time, it is the church, it is the, Salvation Army that the government looked to, to do. So the church must lead the way in this whole thing of racism, because we are actually quite good at it. We are actually good at this. Now, what we can do is really look at scripture first and see what scripture says. One of the things Jesus taught really is to love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others what you want others to do unto you. So those are the key things that we live by. And the epistles of the apostles also said, there is now no Greek or
Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, and you can actually throw in there white or black.
White or black. We are all one because we have the same Spirit of God in us. So when those things become our foundation, then we've got something that we can move forward with. Now, so the church, as we've said before, they must recognize, hang on a minute, there is something happening in society which is actually not right. It is actually not biblical, for us to discriminate because of color or gender or whatever it is. So let's do something about it. And we need to then have strategies and practices that will encourage us to be able to break these things down. and also be the voice for our communities, really to be able to speak to government, speak to authorities, to hang on, this is not right. And the more the church says this is not right, it will register with people in authority. And we have to practice what we say. We have to look out for stereotypes. And then really, if I can borrow the term of Les Miserable, nip it in the back.
Well done.
We just nip it and then take it out of us, you know. And then we can begin to do things, you know, as an ethnic, culture, diverse society. We need to recognize that and begin to build on this. What we need to do as well is to try and then break cliques and clans amongst us as they come along within us, and to try and encourage people to mingle and talk and get to know people's diet. You know, one of the things that I do, I like to eat food from everywhere. You know, I try my best, you know, to eat, as long as it's not a crocodile tail soup, I'll eat it.
And let me tell you something, when you do missions work in Africa, you have to really get used to eating anything.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And, you know, I can't go to Imodium. I always take one with me. Yeah, so
Alfred,
I think that is the starting point of it. We need to pioneer something. We need to have this conversation, and we need to let people feel comfortable in our midst, you know, inclusive, that they are welcome. And we need to realize, look, people are not going to speak the way we speak. You know, people have had to learn English as their second language. So their mother tongue will always come through when they are speaking. You know, and we need to really accommodate that. You know, you will see the stresses and etc. of their strong tongue in there as they speak, but it has to be okay. You know.
I agree, and you know, you can travel the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, and you will hear different dialects when you go from Cornwall right up through Norfolk, through Liverpool, up to Newcastle, right up to the north, and then you go into Scotland and go across to Northern Ireland. You hear different dialects, and they're all speaking English, but you're hearing a different dialect of the way it's spoken, a different accent, and nobody complains.
Yeah.
Yet when an African person speaks they're speaking English with a different dialect, we also know that they need to learn our language. Well, they actually are speaking your language. And have you learned their language? I mean, I can't speak Ghanaian. I can't speak Igbo. I can't. To my shame, as a white African, born and raised in Africa, my parents born and raised in Africa, I know very, very little of any African languages, except for Afrikaans, but that is an exclusively white African language, you know. So Alfred, I want to say it's been wonderful having a chat to you today. Thank you so much for sort of bearing your soul and your thoughts and all these things. And I just want to say from my side, speaking as a white person, I love you as a brother. I love you as a friend. You know, I'm so glad that God brought you into my life. You've added so much to my ministry. You've taken on things that I'm not good at, and you've released me to be who I need to be. And hopefully you've sensed that I've released you into who you need to be.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
You know, and I've loved being on this journey with you. I'm so sorry for the way white people have treated you in this country, for following your daughter around in a shop, for customers and clients at your wonderful care home, and doubting your ability because of your skin color. You did not deserve that at all. You're a man of God. You're raising a godly family, and you're a person that stands with dignity. And I thank you for that, and I thank you for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure that we could do this, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Alfred.
All right then. Thank you, Paddy.
Okay.